Hey guys, I'm Cal Evans. Thank you for joining me with this session on legal ethics. We're going to be looking at digital asset money laundering, obviously with a focus around cryptocurrencies and other things of that nature. It's great to be here, even if I'm not really here. I know last year was fantastic, and it's certainly great to be back and part of this wonderful event again. I hope everybody's enjoying going digital, and I hope those of you who are in Wyoming are enjoying it as well. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I guess next year when COVID and things have calmed down, be great to see you all again. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to dive straight in and throw up the presentation that I've prepared for you. One of the things I like to do whenever I talk about any particular topic is keep things very fluid and very on point. I will occasionally go into side anecdotes. It's a shame because I'd usually welcome questions, but unfortunately at the minute, I can't take those for you because this is going to be pre-recorded. But if any of you do have questions, feel free to catch up with me after. I've left some information in the final slide, which will enable you to be able to get in contact with me. So let's kick off with me. Let's start with me. Look, why am I talking to you today? Why am I here? Look, I'm an international lawyer. I'm barred in the United Kingdom and in Ukraine. With my bar in the UK comes a couple of other jurisdictions such as Gibraltar, Hong Kong, some various other places as well. I am proud to have worked within the cryptocurrency space since about 2015. I am the managing associate and founder of Gresham International. It is a crypto-only law firm. I do always draw the distinction and tell people that I am a crypto lawyer, not a lawyer that works in crypto. I'm a registered legal professional with FINRA. I do a large amount of consulting work with some extra governmental bodies, regulators. Predominantly Gresham and myself, we work with private clients, financial firms and governments. Private clients include those organizations that are looking to undertake a crypto raise, or maybe they are working within the crypto space. Financial firms includes banking, financial institutions, private offices, private funds, and governments. We've worked with recently the government of Dubai, we've worked with the government of Estonia, worked with the government of UK most recently, and within the last 2 weeks, we've actually submitted MOUs with the governments of Paraguay and Bolivia. Alongside all of this, obviously I speak, great to be speaking here, speaking all over the world. I will be out in Turkey next week and then Dubai the week after that as well. And I am an author. I've written a book, The Little Book of Crypto. I don't recommend you read it. It's one of those things I put together a while ago. And to be honest, it's a great read, but it's probably a little bit too basic for the folks that are going to be attending this conference. I have to remember what keyboard I'm using. I've got 3 on my station here. So look, housekeeping, same as everything, guys. I'm a lawyer. The only thing is I'm not your lawyer. So anything that we speak about here today is not to be construed as legal advice, certainly not financial advice or any kind of other advice that you could be given. This is purely for educational purposes only. Again, we do, and I do love working with clients. If you have genuine questions about structuring, about managing, about focusing on any of the things we do today, please feel free to reach out. Sure, some of the people I know already that have reached out will be pleased to tell you that I am happy to answer questions. It's really important that we manage this particular topic that I'm going to be talking about today, and we manage it well together. And I'm going to be speaking a little bit more about that later on. So look, the focus point here, what we're really addressing is money laundering. Money laundering is, for those of you that might not be sure, the process of taking funds gained from illegal or illicit activities and putting them back into circulation to make them appear as if they're legally gained. Why do companies do this? Why do criminals do this? Why do enterprises which are unscrupulous do this? Well, they do it more often than not for greed, for gain, for purpose, to meet the objectives of what it is that they're looking to achieve. We always have to draw the distinction here, guys, between money laundering and other aspects such as money transmission, money couriering, as it's referred to, and then anything such as tax evasion that usually comes with enterprise. So you'll see some of these things aligned together. I might speak about them occasionally, and different countries look at them very differently. For a great example, I pick the United States. You can move anything, any amount of money into the United States, but anything above $10,000 you have to declare. The purpose of that is to manage money trafficking, money trading, that could be illegal because it's in cash. However, anything above that you have to report, but different countries approach that very differently. That's just one very basic example of how the world looks at certain things differently. But when we talk about it, this definition is pretty much what we're focusing on. Look, the side effects of money laundering are pretty common. They're pretty easy to understand, and they are pretty. I'm trying to put this in a way that sounds very diplomatic. They are everywhere, but they are also nowhere, and it's very unfortunate. Okay, criminal activity is everywhere, and it is as simple as somebody robbing the house next door, selling the items that they steal, and then using that money. It's how they use that money that is the essence of money laundering. Everybody has in their mind, whenever they think of money laundering, a specifically large-scale operation. And so they think, oh, well, it doesn't really impact me. It doesn't really affect me. But actually, that's wrong. We do, when we allow money laundering to take place, it enables the facilitation of things like organized crime to flourish, for terrorism to flourish. There are groups and organizations out there in the world that unfortunately do some pretty nasty things, and their survival is dependent upon finance. It's dependent upon money, and laundering that money, being able to use that money after it's been gained illegally, is their strength. It's what keeps them in business. The UN estimated that the amount of money laundered in around 2019 was about 2 to 5% of the GDP. They estimate that around 90% of money laundering goes untracked, goes untraced. So that's around $800 billion to $2 trillion of money that's laundered throughout the world. That is not a small feat. Guys, that is the GDP of a small country every year is laundered as a direct result of illegal activity. And so whenever we talk about this, it's very important. And the reason I made it an ethics point, and I think a lot of people do, is because ethically it has some very major ramifications, and we can talk a little bit more about that today. Look, what are the complications with money laundering? Well, the first thing is this. What's illegal in one country is not always illegal in another. Money, finances are international, regardless of whatever currency you use. The concept of money laundering is international, and it's frequently done internationally because people will move money using the situation where one thing in one country is not illegal as it is in another. When we break down and we look at what is legal and what is illegal within different countries, we begin to see a very complex layer of what exactly it is money laundering is enabling and facilitating. I pick drugs as an example. In my father's generation, the concept of selling marijuana legally was fundamentally insane. In the United Kingdom, it still remains a Class C drug with some fringe laws around it to be considered a medical medical use purpose if you have a medical certificate from a healthcare professional. However, for the most part, it is still an illegal drug. This means that if you sell it, the money gained from it is illegal, and when you put it back into circulation, you are effectively money laundering. But then in some countries, for example, a lot of states here in the United States, it is not illegal. And so the same money can be earned from selling the same thing, but in one country, that action is illegal, in another country, it is not. So we then enter the realm of, look, what constitutes the illegal activity by which the money is being laundered? There is also a difference in tax situations. One of the biggest things that we look at is money laundering being tied to tax. Again, illegal activity subject to any taxation statutes is that if you're not declaring any money, if you're not declaring any income, then you really don't have to show where that income came from. And of course, not showing where income came from is kind of the prerequisite to money laundering. Look, I spoke about this a moment ago. Many people confuse white-collar crime with more violent crime. I've spoken to people before who address money laundering. They have this view of, fat cats in a bank somewhere, laundering money, making money off the top, and really not caring. And people kind of say, look, what does it matter? It's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with us. I gave the example of the house next door being burgled, being robbed, and that is really the essence of it. More violent crime is fueled by money laundering, people trafficking, the illegal sex trade, drug mules, drug flowing, everything that goes with the more violent crimes, right up to kind of exponential crime. When we look at terrorism, organizations such as ISIS were funded for years, and there are still many organizations out there throughout the world that are terrorists, and they are directly financed through money laundering. Those terrorists don't just pick white-collar crime. They actually impact people all over the world. We know this, we've seen this. Nobody needs a lesson on that. And so we have to remember that this is very much one of the complications that is brought around with money laundering. Many people don't see it. They see it as a victimless crime. Just because the money laundering itself is victimless, it does not mean that, for the most part, victimless, I should stress, but it does not mean that individuals are not being impacted by this. We also do not live in a cashless society. Cash exists everywhere. If it is not used primarily within your region, within your country, or by you as a person, elsewhere within the world, it is still very much in circulation. There is a huge percentage of the world that is unbanked, guys, a huge percentage of the world. And many people also ignore that. So they are dependent upon cash. Whenever people talk about money laundering, cashless societies, it is not a third world problem. It's also a first world problem. I'm currently here in California. One of the things that is a very hot topic here is the population of Mexican and other South American people that come here illegally and are working. They can only deal in cash because it's almost impossible for them to get a bank account. But that cash remains in circulation. And so, again, it is not a third world problem. It happens everywhere. So cashless societies do not exist. Where there is cash, there can obviously be money laundering. And people are often tricked into money laundering. This is why I prefaced my earlier statement with sometimes people confuse the kind of white collar with more violent crime. Sometimes people are tricked into money laundering. We've seen this a lot. People want to use somebody else's bank account. People want them to undertake transfers from them. Hey, could you loan me this money? I'll pay you it back. Could you do this? There are many ways that very innocent people are tricked into money laundering. And so all of these things, we as professionals and we as individuals have to be very mindful of whenever we do business and whenever we're looking at things. Look, tackling money laundering. I gave a speech on this at the EU a couple of years ago with an EU focus group. There's three pillars to tackling money laundering. It's cooperation, it's enforcement, and it's legislation. Those three pillars are equally as important as one another. Cooperation comes from organizations and groups working together. Enforcement comes from police, regulators, and overseers being able to do their job. And legislation is about giving those parties the power and the trust to be able to actually assist within the entire ecosystem, because this is international, because this is focused around an entire ecosystem. The whole situation is that we have to be able to manage each one of these pieces together and independently, and all of us have to work together in order to do this. So we need to be mindful that these are the three pillars. And as long as we keep that in mind, we'll get there. Let's go through each one of them in turn. It's a really good focus point. Look, cooperation is not just about police. Whenever I've spoken about this, some people have said, look, cooperation, well, it's all about the police working together. It's all about the good guys catching the bad guys. It's not. In order for this to work, in order for money laundering to be eradicated or certainly stopped, to a degree where it becomes ineffective, different entities have to work with each other. The banks are sometimes called the guardians of the financial world. They do a huge amount to ensure that money laundering doesn't occur. I know many of us, all of us, have dealt with our bank and found some of their particular measures perhaps overzealous, perhaps a annoyance. I think that's fair to say. The real situation is this: they are doing a very valid job of making sure that money that is received into their accounts is not illegal. It is not laundered. It's not being laundered. That is a hugely important thing for them. Lawyers, we as legal professionals, we have a duty to monitor and to check activity, our clients. There is a big difference around the world with this. And one of the very quick things that I want to touch on is that you, as a lawyer, wherever you are barred, especially if you are international or multi-state, I would encourage you to check the rules and regulations of the countries and states of which you are barred. For example, in America, in the United States, there is the attorney-client privilege rule. That is sacrosanct. It can only be broken in very, very limited circumstances. In the United Kingdom, lawyers are the polar opposite. They actually have an obligation to report money laundering they suspect. It falls under their obligations of their code of conduct. Real estate agents, whenever they're buying and selling properties, they have an obligation to look for what might be obvious money laundering. Auditors and accountants especially, they have to be advised, they have to be aware of what could be and what are the signs of money laundering. And guys, we're going to talk a little bit later about what are the signs of money laundering. Police forces working together to deal with those issues. This is the most associated thing with cooperation. Realistically, the police have been doing this for a very long time, and it's very well organized. I've spoken with Europol. I've worked with the FIU in Estonia. I've worked with similar bodies in Singapore and various other places. Financial crime police force is a well-oiled machine. They are very organized and they know what they're doing. And of course, finally, part of what we're talking about here today, giving people the knowledge to understand money laundering when it occurs. What are the things to look out for? What should you be doing? Enforcement, like I say, every major police force has a money laundering or financial crimes unit, every single one. Money laundering is a hot topic. Every single country has outlawed money laundering in some form or another. It is one of the only universal laws that exists across the world. And most countries give reporting powers to third parties, such as banks or lawyers. In the employment world, it's known as whistleblowing laws, but banks and lawyers have got a good armament to protect themselves and to ensure that if any money laundering is suspected, it can be reported. And it's very important. Remember the three pillars, you form one of those pillars. Legislation, money laundering has become a massive issue over the last decade, a massive issue. It is a combination of the advancement of technology, the speed of travel. One of the things that I always point to was the introduction of a 500 euro note. We've created a world where things are more expensive, but we're reluctant to create higher monetary value instruments only because of money laundering. The 500 euro note used to exist, it no longer exists. You could keep up to $25, $35 million in a single cereal box in 500 euro notes. So it was removed. However, the need for a note that big has still not been removed. The realization that most, if all not, crime is financed through money laundering, in fact, the whole purpose of a lot of crime is money, then we realize that it's a massive problem. And laws that have been enacted are always laws that ensure that a protocol is followed. Banks, legislators, regulators, governments are not trying to stop people from sending or using their money. Most of the time, they are actually just genuinely trying to stop illegal, ill-gotten gains from moving around the world. And that's a really important thing. So look, enter cryptocurrencies. Banks, regulators, enforcers all follow protocols. They follow a certain level of protocol. They understand when remittances are made. It doesn't matter whether you use a SWIFT, an IBAN, a BACS, or whatever particular financial transaction model you use. Protocols have been set in place, and including dealing in cash as well. And so when cryptocurrencies entered the scene, this really created a problem as far as money laundering was concerned. And they do create a massive problem. Now, I want to just pause here and interject for a real quick second. Anybody that has heard me speak, anybody that has worked with me knows what an advocate I am of cryptocurrencies. I draw the distinction between saying how awesome cryptocurrencies are, and I genuinely believe that when most people understand cryptocurrencies, they will like them. I am yet to meet one individual that likes criminal activity. It's a simple fact. The technology that is brought with cryptocurrencies, the inherent privacy, the methods of storage, that's where the issues are created. For example, when we talk about money transmissions, money transference, that's one big piece of money laundering, getting it from one place to another. With cryptocurrencies, that's very easy. We don't even have to talk about blockchain movements, getting money placed on the ledger. I have various wallets about the place. I don't actually have one with me. You can move an insane amount of money on a device that's no bigger than a USB stick. And that is a real problem as far as money laundering is concerned, because it's not as if you are walking through an airport with bags of cash on you. It's relatively easy to spot. It's relatively easy to find somebody that's doing that. If you just have a USB stick on you, it is no different, especially if it's passworded, protected, pretty much inaccessible. It creates a problem. Money trafficking, money transmission, and spending money are all easier with crypto. One of the things we love about it is one of its biggest problems from a money laundering sense. Like money trafficking, we move it around the world. Money transmission, we've seen how quickly and how easy it is money can move from one country to another. I can be sitting here and I can send money to people in North Korea, which is technically illegal, which is illegal. I don't think there's a technicality about it. It's illegal, but it still can be done. Now, if I were to approach a bank or a financial institution, there's almost little to no way that will be possible because of the current sanctions. And spending money. Wherever cryptocurrency is accepted, it can be spent. Now, that may seem like a real kind of non-problem, but actually many people neglect the grey market. Grey market in terms of money laundering is where illegal funds are used to purchase legal goods. The legal goods are then resold. Great example, a lot of grey market activity comes from the purchase of expensive electronic items. When those electronic items are purchased with illegal gains, which could be done in theory through Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency, they are then resold through eBay, through Amazon. I'm not saying that those companies endorse or facilitate money laundering. These items are just resold. And then the money that is brought in from that is obviously then looks clean. And that is the whole purpose of money laundering. If anybody says, where did this money come from? You can point to the sale of those particular electronic items and justify where the funds came from. The issues, there are real issues with cryptocurrencies that enable all of this stuff to happen. And I do not believe that anybody in the crypto world and the crypto space is unfamiliar with any of these. Unregulated exchanges. This, for me, is probably the biggest problem that faces the cryptocurrency industry. Again, decentralized everything is fantastic. I am an advocate for it. I can't explain it. I also love the freedom that it gives people. But when a company is created and it facilitates swapping transactions, everything else that goes with that, people should be allowed to do that, and they can do that. But when companies do it in an unregulated way, and I respect, by the way, that regulation on this matter is relatively new and inaccessible for some jurisdictions, but the fact of the matter is there's a clear difference between a company which shows intent to at least play with some regulations and companies that are not interested. And they directly facilitate and enable money laundering, which assists with terrorism, which assists with bad things. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the number one problem facing this industry. Unregulated sale and buyback, buying cryptocurrencies, selling them. It's akin to the guy on the street opening his jacket, having a bunch of watches in there. It's the same thing. Look, you are buying something from somebody you don't know. Great, they are a company, but you are still buying it from them, and you don't know them. Unrestricted cross-border payments, again, this for me is not such a hot topic. In terms of money laundering, it does present an issue. And then money not entering the system. One of the key things that enables cryptocurrencies to be used for money laundering is that you don't actually ever have to enter it into fiat circulation. So those safeguards that we spoke about, the banks, the lawyers, the accountants, it's never seen by any of them. So it's never reported. It's never suspicious enough to raise concern. But look, we can sit here and talk negatively about cryptocurrencies for a very long time. However, there is a missed opportunity here. One of the things is, if everybody was to switch to a regulated version of cryptocurrencies, a stress-regulated version of cryptocurrencies, we actually stand to do away with money laundering, or certainly significantly dent the amount of money laundering that takes place. We think of the technology behind it. There is a ledger which shows every transaction which occurs. The only piece of that puzzle is the privacy between the parties. If that was removed, if wallets were displayed, you'd easily be able to see who sent that and when they sent it. We can't forget that money laundering has occurred for years before cryptocurrencies. And so people that point the finger at cryptocurrencies and go, hang on a minute, I think this is terrible and it's used for money laundering. Actually, newsflash, money laundering has been around long before cryptocurrencies. Again, when I spoke with Europol, one of the things I said, the European Union, one of the things I said was, look, whenever there is new technologies, there is new bad guys. That's the reality of it. We get smarter, the criminals get smarter. And that is what happens. And that is what is happening here. Look, in 2019, $2.8 billion was estimated to be laundered using crypto exchanges. Now let's pause for a second here. $2.8 billion. That's an $800 billion to a $2 trillion situation. And 2.8 billion is used through crypto. I think we begin to paint a picture of just exactly how much of a non-problem this is. But I think in order to get ahead of it, we need to look at the good that cryptocurrencies can do. And I think we miss that. So in order to understand that, we need to look at, what are governments doing? And we'll keep this within the crypto perspective. This should really say, what are governments doing for cryptocurrencies? But what are they doing for cryptocurrencies? Look, some of them are doing nothing. There are some countries out there that genuinely do not have a position on cryptocurrencies. They don't care. They don't want to know. They either see it as a fad, they consider themselves to have bigger issues, or they just don't want to deal with it. They are doing nothing. But some are addressing it head on. Some are creating money laundering laws. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But some are focusing on issues that are caused by it and actually managing it. The reason I raise that is because whereas money laundering is a true international problem, when it's put into the context of cryptocurrencies, it's almost as if sometimes that potential problem is missed and sometimes it's over managed. There is a scale of we're not doing anything to we are going to regulate its existence to, we are going to regulate it out of existence. And there is a scale in between that. And you have to be aware of that. So what do we need to do as professionals, as individuals? What do we need to do? Look, the cooperation piece is as important as the other two elements, if not the most important. If you detect, if you pick up, if you sense money laundering, you have to deal with it. You have to. It's one of these things where you may think it's only a couple of $100. It's only a couple of $1,000. We need to put things in an international perspective. What is a couple of $1,000s to us is a year's salary somewhere else in the world. And many people forget that. I said this earlier, and this is a very important sentiment. We may love cryptocurrencies, but none of us love crime. And so it's kind of like our duty from an ethical standpoint to make sure that this gets really managed very well. We need to look at international laws and understand them. If you are a domestic US attorney only, if you are a domestic UK attorney only, if you are barred in one country and you focus on one country and you work within cryptocurrencies, congratulations, you've just graduated to being an international lawyer. Because everything your client does, everything your client focuses on has an international piece. And just because they are selling, they are trading, they are issuing, they are mining, they are pooling, they are anything with cryptocurrencies, means that it can be accessible internationally, and you have to understand those international laws. You can find out so much by researching, by doing what we do best as lawyers, going away and reading the legislation and understanding it, appreciating what I said earlier, that there is a scale of doing nothing to doing something, and that this obligation may also lie with you as a professional, and it lies with your clients as an individual or a corporation, whichever they may be. You need to understand these laws. If you get stuck, if you cannot, one of the things I flag and I raise now is there are professional cryptocurrency lawyers out there. I'm not flagging myself as the shining example, but I'm saying I am a cryptocurrency lawyer. If there is something that perplexes you or you are not sure about or you do not understand, contact me or somebody else. This event in particular has probably the most amount of crypto-specific lawyers, or at least lawyers that have worked in crypto enough to be knowledgeable on it. Use them. Seriously, because when we talk about financing terrorism, when we talk about people's lives being ruined, this is not a small matter. It may be simple enough for you to just mine currencies or transmit or sell Bitcoin, but you don't know the back end of what you're doing. And it's massively important. one of the things that I do, look, what do we need to do? One of the things that I do with a lot of my clients is I say, if you are looking to play ball, if you are looking to play by the rules, register your company somewhere where there is serious crypto regulation in play. It might only be something simple. Many companies, Estonia, a few years ago, issued a license. It was designed for companies that issued a wallet and companies that issued an exchange. Really, it wasn't recognized anywhere else in the world. It was an internal Estonia thing. And you had to comply with the FIU and Estonia monetary laws, which obviously derive a lot from EU laws, but this was not an EU license. This was not passported. It was something that was domestically for Estonia. Thousands of companies signed up for it. Thousands of individuals signed up for it because they showed a willingness to at least be regulated, to at least show that they had a sincere attitude towards it. And the same is possible now more than ever. Remember, even if your client's company is not domiciled in the EU or Singapore or in the UK, there is nothing stopping them from having a facilitating company, an SPV, or a branch office in any of those locations. The UK has some of the best crypto laws in the world now. They regulate Bitcoin ATMs, Bitcoin transactions, ICOs. You are regulated by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. Next year, I don't know if many of you are familiar with this, but the European Union is implementing new laws. You are currently obliged under anti-money laundering laws to register and undertake crypto transactions in a specific way. Singapore, MAS, has issued some fantastic rules out there, focus more so on traders. Guys, we prepared a great list of countries, that have various laws. If you want a copy of it, message me, I'll send it to you. But make sure that you understand them and register somewhere. Nobody can ever argue that it's about taxation, that it's about luring clients in, that it's about corporate image. It doesn't matter. Singapore is a tax neutral country. If you are internationally focused and doing no domestic work in Singapore, it's tax free. The European Union has fantastic tax-based countries, Malta, Estonia. The United Kingdom has a fantastic tax protocol, but all of these countries have different layers of exposure and nominee directors. Everything you want to do, every justification you could have to not register a company there, it doesn't exist. So voluntarily register companies in these locations. The single most important thing when you are asking yourself, what do we need to do as professionals, as individuals, is to identify your clients and who you do business with. There is a legal obligation in many countries, if you are doing certain activities, forming companies, running companies, enabling money transmissions, anything. The spectrum is vast. You have to identify your client. And that doesn't matter if you are a lawyer, that doesn't matter if you are a notary, it doesn't matter if you are something in between any of those particular degrees. You have to identify your clients. If it involves money, if it involves a substantial sum of money, and you are facilitating a third-party action, you need to identify that individual. The way you do that is by the following. There's a rule of thumb. It's the 2-document assessment. The first is a Class A document, which is a passport. Obtain a copy of their passport. The second is a Class B document, which is a utility bill or a other document such as a bank statement. You have to make sure that everything on there marries up. Make sure that it's not old, because of course you can have something from an old address. So the rule of thumb is typically between 30 and 90 days old. Don't, whatever you do, fall short of the idea that because I'm doing business with a company, I've had their certificate of incorporation and that's okay. No, you need client documents. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And make sure that you are satisfied. If you have questions about the individual, if the passport looks suspicious, you need to ask questions about it. There are various international databases that will let you run questions, queries on individuals. You can do that. And report any suspicious activities to the police. Guys, don't just turn them away. Don't just say, listen, I'm really sorry, I can't work with you, I'm sure somebody else will do. Make a difference, make an actual difference, report it to the police. In the UK, it's an obligation. Elsewhere, there's a question mark next to it. But if you suspect illegal activity, if you're a lawyer, you're an officer of the court. If you're not, and you are a professional, your professional standards should tell you enough that you need to report it. Make sure you know who you're doing business with. Identify. If you cannot identify, then don't. What should you look out for? Difference in tax avoidance, which is legal and money laundering. I flagged this up. Sometimes clients will talk to you about, look, I want to limit my tax impact. I don't really want to pay tax. That is not money laundering. That is tax avoidance. Remember, for those of you who remember Law School 101, Business Law School 101, for those of you who do not, this is a free lesson for you. Tax evasion is illegal. Tax avoidance is just sensible planning. It is also not money laundering. So please remember that. But serious things to look out for. Look, one party doesn't want to identify themselves. I can't find my passport. I don't have that. Can I send you an old scan? No. You need to see the document. You need to tangibly touch it and make sure it's real. If you can't be with that client, then you need to go to you need to get them, to go to a notary or another lawyer local to them and have somebody physically see it. Somebody's got to see that document. One party insists on doing a transaction through another bank account. I am sure, for those of you who are in business, I know professionally, I've seen this a handful of times, there are many people who go, hey, look, I need to pay this invoice, but I'm going to pay it from this company. Is that okay? Or my brother's going to pay it because my bank account's been frozen. No, that's not okay. If you're doing business with that client, that money has to come from that client. One or more parties can't account for their income. A lot of what we see is organizations that raise funds, and the funds will come in. We will, as part of due diligence on behalf of the client, undertake a level of KYC on that. If the party can't account for where it came from, then that's a major red flag. Even if it's something as simple as, oh, well, I was employed or I have these various projects, that's okay. You need them to account for it. If a client or somebody insists on keeping a transaction off the books, again, tax evasion is illegal. You shouldn't keep anything off the books, obviously. Should be especially concerned about it for money laundering purposes. Understand the difference between an ultimate beneficial owner and a nominee. Guys, when you deal with a corporation, make sure the person you are working with owns that company. Get a record of owners or get an undertaking. Wyoming is a great place that doesn't publish owners of a corporation. That is not a problem. In fact, that is actually an asset in many cases. It doesn't mean that you cannot do business with them. What you have to do is get them to demonstrate that they own it. It can be something as simple as a letter, as an undertaking on company-headed paper. Share certificates are always the best, but there are some simple things that you can do. Privacy is always a valuable instrument in companies and in corporate law. You should always respect that when people want it. And don't take it as a red flag for money laundering. Be extra cautious of companies based offshore. They do not keep a register. They do not require to keep a register. They do not require any kind of tax returns. You can still work with them, but just be more sensible about how you identify who owns that company. And always ask more questions if needed. We've all been there, guys. We've all been desperate to get that client on board. We've all been desperate to start that contract. Ask more questions. Don't take the risk. It's genuinely not worth it. Look what's happening to combat this. Governments and regulators know of the problems faced. They know of it. We've spoken about that scale. We don't need to address it again, but they are dealing with it. For those of you unfamiliar, the federal government is going to introduce a digital dollar. It was in the last round of coronavirus stimulus bills. It was dropped. It's a matter of time before it comes in. Other countries are doing lots more. They also do not want or have either tried to outlaw them and seen both negative results. So we're never going to see cryptocurrencies become illegal. It's just not going to happen. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we may have paused on that, but now we know. We will see more licensing, more crypto companies becoming mainstream. We're about to see crypto companies go public. More information is accessible about cryptocurrencies, licenses being given. We've seen that in various states. We've seen the great stuff that Wyoming has done with their crypto licenses, which is fantastic. It's pioneering. Again, it shows that it's becoming mainstream and it's enabling companies to do business legally. And the death of unlicensed companies in this space. If you are still thinking of running a company without a license that's going to do lots of healthy and fun things in the crypto space, get it out of your mind. It's not worth it. Go and get a license somewhere. Your clients will appreciate you more for it, genuinely. Guys, that's it from me. It's been a pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope this has been really informative for you. I know in our time together, we only got to really scratch the surface, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach me on any of the two methods to the side, or come and grab me in the virtual lobby. I don't think there's a virtual bar or any kind of virtual coffee house, but you can catch up with me whenever you can. But look, thanks guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to join me, and I hope you've enjoyed it.